Welcome to Coast View, the show that every single day celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi, and Mississippi, for that matter, such an amazing place to live, work, and play. Hey, we have a very special edition of Coast View today. I'm going to just do a quick introduction, and then we'll get right to the show. Something that I've looked forward to. It's unfortunate that we're having this conversation, but we'll make the best of it. I have a dear cousin who lives in Alabama, and her daughter, Michelle Tice, has adopted 2 boys from Ukraine. And as a result, Michelle and I are friends on Facebook, and we stay in touch, and her sister April and I are friends as well. And Michelle, I've been really watching closely, though, in the wake of the Russia's attack on Ukraine, of the connections that Michelle still has with her friends back in Ukraine. And it sort of brought to mind the idea to get Michelle to introduce me to one of her friends there, and someone that I could connect with and maybe stay in touch with throughout this situation that is happening in Ukraine. So Michelle introduced me to an independent missionary who is a friend of hers in Ukraine. Her name is Laurie Jackson. We're going to tell you more about Laurie here in just a second. But without any further ado, let me just welcome Laurie Jackson to Coast View. How are you doing, Laurie?
Hi, we're okay. We're doing the best we can.
I know you are. I'm surprised. We're using Skype. We have a fairly good connection, and I know that you've had some challenges with Wi-Fi along the way, and we'll make the best of it. But you're okay. So let's kind of set this up a little bit. You have an apartment actually on the river in Kyiv, and you recently had to sort of move over into Western Ukraine. Where you are now, do you feel relatively safe, Laurie?
Where I am now is safe. Yes, my apartment in Kyiv is not safe right now, but we left after the first explosion started, and so where we are now is probably as safe as you can be anywhere in Ukraine. So
yeah, I know. We have a lot of ground to cover, Laurie. You and I had an opportunity to visit by phone on Saturday. After several attempts, we finally were able to connect, and I got a sense of your story. I got a sense of your perception of the fact that you are very thankful that Americans don't have an indifference toward this war. And me having come from digital media and newspaper background, I have said more than once that what will make a difference in this particular situation, this war in Ukraine, is the fact that social media and the internet are going to really change the name of the game. And in some respects, I think Putin may have underestimated the role that social media may play and that technology will play. I think that when you're in a world where one phone call can be made to Elon Musk, and suddenly you've got more internet capability, more Wi-Fi capability in an entire country, we're in a different place from a technology point of view. This war. And because every single person who is in Ukraine has a smartphone, or most have smartphones, and they can record what's happening around them, it's being told by citizen journalists in ways we've never seen before. Do you have a sense of that, Laurie, and from where you're sitting, how much proliferation of information is coming out of Ukraine and touching the rest of the world?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ukraine actually has been ahead of the game with technology for even longer than America. It's a running joke in my family that in the middle of a war, I have better internet than my parents have in Tallahassee. And so actually when in 2013 that led to the war beginning in 2014, most of what happened through that was because of social media, because how people use what they had to communicate with each other and say, this is what's going on. And for sure, one of our greatest benefits and blessings right now is that we have connection with each other and we know how to use it, and we are. Mm-hmm.
Wow, there's a lot, and we do have a little bit of loss in communication from time to time, but I think our listeners can hear the brunt of what you're saying, and that is that technology even in the face of this war, has been a godsend. It's been this opportunity for you and fellow missionaries across that country to stay in touch with each other. Let's take a step back for just a second. You grew up in Tallahassee. Through an organization in Tallahassee, you were introduced to missionary work in Ukraine. You're what is you describe as an independent missionary. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I actually came over with my church group, or not with my church group, sorry, with a friend of mine from church, who had come before with the church group. She and I came in to spend the summer in Ukraine in 2004, and so we were here for 3 months that summer and went back to the States. And I had known even before that trip that I wanted to be a missionary. I just didn't know what it looked like or where, maybe in the States or somewhere else. And so was attending college while I was trying to figure out what God wanted, and then actually went on a trip to Guatemala. And on the plane on the way to Guatemala, my heart just, I want to be in Ukraine. And so the next summer I went back to Ukraine and was here for 3 months that summer. And about halfway through the summer, the director of the camp organization that I was working with said, "How would you feel like staying and helping us full time?" So at the time, we didn't have the technology we have now. And so I called my mom. I hadn't called her ever from Ukraine. We had sent emails once a week during the 3 months I was there the summer before. And again, this summer, about once a week, an email. But this time I called her and I said, "How would you feel if I stayed in Ukraine?" And she said, "I kind of saw that coming." And my best friend who is here, she and I stayed up praying before I made the decision to call my mom and ask. And at the time, I didn't know the language. I didn't have a place to stay after camps ended. I didn't have a whole lot of connections, but both of us really felt like it was God leading. And she said, "My bank account's your bank account, and I'll go home and tell everyone else." And she did. And all these years later, I'm still here.
And that was in 2005. So tell me,
Yes.
tell me what it is about the heart and soul of Ukrainians that you fell in love with that made it so compelling that you wanted to do your work there over all these years.
Everything I hope you're seeing right now, as you're watching Ukrainians stand up for each other, take care of each other, and just be super creative, very tenacious. I don't know. They're just such inspiring people. They love deeply. And I hope that's coming across to the world, because I've known it the whole time I've been here, but I don't know, it's been multiplied over the past couple weeks for sure.
So Laura, okay, so of course the invasion happened, but in the days and weeks and months leading up to the invasion, did you have a sense, and the people that you work with, did they have a sense that this was actually going to happen? You hoped that it wouldn't happen? What was your state of mind as it related to, sort of the days leading up to the invasion?
So I had actually been living in Lugansk when the war began in 2014. So I'd seen it happen before. And so probably about a month before anything actually got escalated, a lot of our friends were discussing, like, will something happen? What will happen? If something happens, what will that look like? And for the most part, my Kyiv friends weren't really expecting anything to happen in Kyiv. My friends who had been displaced from Lugansk and I would say, we don't know, like, anything's possible. Like, everything you think right now is not possible is possible. And actually, the night before we left, had that exact conversation with my friends that I was living with. We had started discussing if we thought things were going to get worse and should we try to get out of Kyiv. And I looked at my friend who was saying, "I think it'll be okay," and just said, like, we need to decide. Like, if we decide to stay, we need to stay knowing what could come, because anything is possible. And so I feel like, yeah, there were kind of these two different groups of people, those who were expecting something and those who weren't.
And so the unimaginable, or maybe the somewhat imaginable, happened because you had some previous experience with the war in 2014. And so, Putin's rhetoric combined with what ultimately began to transpire in the city, in the country, started to come to fruition. And at some point, you had to move over to Western Ukraine, which is where you are now. We're not specific about where you are specifically. But what we're going to do, Laurie, when we come up on the other side, I want people to understand what kind of work you're involved in. I want to talk more specifically about the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding in front of your face. The fact that you had a chance to get out of there and you chose not to because you said there's too much to be done. And there are a lot of people like you who have chosen not to get out of there, who have stayed to help in any way that they possibly can. But we're going to break all that down in just a few minutes when we continue our conversation with Laurie Jackson, an independent missionary who is coming to us from Western Ukraine. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast View. I have my new friend, Laurie Jackson, who is an independent missionary in Ukraine. She actually lives in Kyiv, but she has sort of escaped over to Western Ukraine, where at least currently she feels relatively safe under the circumstances. That's about as good as you can say. So, Laurie, when we went to break, I thought it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about the kind of work that you do. So why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay, so in normal life, we said, I'm an independent missionary. I had been working with a camp organization when I first moved to Ukraine, and then started helping with several different orphanages, and moved about 3 years into my time in Ukraine to far eastern Ukraine and Lugansk, and was working with several different orphanages there before the war started, and actually ended up leaving Lugansk with 12 kids who had been in a city that was heavily bombed at the beginning of the war. And so we came to Kyiv and were there for about 2 weeks. And within that 2-week period, we were just trying to figure out what was best for them. They were about to go to the States for a hosting program. And so my plan was to go back to Lugansk and finish our camp season. But in the middle of those 2 weeks, it became clear that I wouldn't be able to go back. And so I started calling friends in Kyiv and saying, I need help. And my Ukrainian family said, you'll move in with us. And I said, I have Pasha with me, who is an orphan who had aged out. And they said, oh, he'll come too. And I said, I promised the in Slavic they could move in with me. And they were 2 kids whose mom was not in the picture. And he said, it's okay, they'll come too. And it just kept growing. We had expected to move back to Lugansk as soon as the war ended. Obviously it didn't. And so when fall started, I knew the kids needed to be in school. And so started making arrangements for that, found our own apartment, and several other friends from Lugansk started calling and saying, we need a place to live. We need jobs. Do you think we can find them in Kyiv? And I said, I don't know about jobs, but you'll definitely have a place to live. And so they started moving in. And as we were there, we were looking for things we could do to help other people. And so ended up helping a lot of families who were adopting, like you mentioned, Michelle earlier. And one of her boys was actually from Lugansk. I knew him while we were there. And the other one we met in Kyiv, and they spent a lot of time with me and my girls. And then we found a family-type children's home that has 10 kids living with them, and we visit them weekly. I spend time with them and spend the week with them so the parents can have some time off, things like this. And also a transition home for orphans who have graduated from the orphanage. Became really good friends of ours. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's so compelling. Poor Ukraine has fought so hard for its independence, and then the issue of what has taken place in eastern Ukraine, that predates, of course, all of the current situations. I mean, that began in 2014. This sort of contested area there. It's unfortunate you have that experience, but it does help you sort of understand what's to come and how bad it could possibly get, and so on. And in future shows, we'll talk more about all that experience and what it meant to you. But as you sort of look at the humanitarian crisis, now you've made the tour, you've made the journey from Kyiv to where you are now in Western Ukraine. When you read about, what you and I talked about over the weekend, when you read about this humanitarian crisis, this morning estimated some 1.7 million people have escaped to bordering countries, Poland being sort of number one on the list for the number of people that are headed into Poland. What do you observe in looking at this humanitarian crisis as people try to exit the country?
It's heartbreaking. Families are being separated indefinitely. We've had several whose husbands have stayed here with us, and wives and children have crossed the border. And even just this week, a friend whose wife and two little kids, a daughter and son, crossed the border. And the first night they were there, they called and he could see her in the cell phone and his little girl, and she's saying, "I want to be in Daddy's hands. I want to be in Daddy's arms." And it's one story of thousands, literally thousands. Our transition home that I was talking about, that they're getting ready to cross the border today, this morning, they hugged each other goodbye. And I don't know, there just aren't words for.
Yeah, Lori, I know it's hard to watch over and over and over and over again, because men greater than 16 years of age are being required to stay. So you've got situations where families are being separated. And as you well know, they understand they may never be able to come back, or they may never see their loved one again. The future is more than uncertain, and it's got to be just devastating. How do you, in this moment, how do you find a way to help? And why didn't you choose to go to Poland or wherever you had the opportunity to go?
When we left Kyiv, we were on our way to the border. Was our plan. As much as you can have a plan when you're woken up by explosions at 5 o'clock in the morning. And on the way there, they enforced the rule about men over the age of 16 not being able to leave. And so I was in the car with a good friend of mine and his wife, and we were driving to the border. And when this news came, a couple of our friends actually were able to cross the border. They got there in time before the law kicked in. And so once we realized that it wasn't possible for her husband to leave, we said, okay, well, let's drive to where we are now, and we'll spend the night, and we'll make decisions the next morning. So we spent the night, and we met with other friends, and there were also other families with women and children here, and we made the decision the next morning that we would send the women and children across the border. And my friend and I said, we won't leave. And as soon as we made that decision, phone calls started coming in asking for help. Where can we go? What are the safest roads to take leaving Kyiv? What are the ways how do you do this? Where do you find fuel? How do you find a place to stay? All these different questions that everybody had started coming in. And we saw a need, and we said, okay, let's find a way to help. And that's what we've been trying to do since.
Well, God bless you, Laurie. What I should also point out is that you, because of your work over all of these years, you have an extensive network throughout the country, literally just every corner of the country, and literally probably just about every city. What are you hearing from your friends?
I wish you could be here. I wish you could experience just a little bit of the Ukrainian spirit. I don't know. There's this deep devastation and fear. And at the same time, there's incredible hope. And I don't know. It's just a really special place to be, to understand this in the middle. And so we do have friends who are in really difficult places and really scary places. But the one thing, like, I feel is that everyone has some sort of hope, even now.
Okay, aside from prayers, what would you say to people who are listening now about how they can help?
My Ukrainian friends ask that you go to protests, show your support for the Ukrainian people in a way that government officials see. And that's not even coming from me. It's coming from my friends and the people here. Other things you can do. I don't know if you're paying attention to what's going on with gas, but spend the extra dollar to buy gas that's not coming to you from Russia. There are plenty of different organizations that are raising funds. If you have finances to support people on the ground, please be careful about who you support. Please make sure you're looking into and researching so that the money is actually getting into the hands of people who need it. But Ukrainians, like I said, are incredibly creative people, and they will use whatever 5 cents you give them to do infinitely more than you can even imagine. We've always said that. Like, we have camps and American teams come over, and they see what Ukrainians can do with nothing. Like, we could never do that in the States. We're just not that creative.
As it relates to the Russian oil, it does appear that the United States and NATO are beginning to get aligned around what they might be able to do not to take any, because we all know what the impact of accepting that oil really is ultimately. But Laurie, here's the thing. This is only the first of many conversations. First of all, God bless you for being willing to do what you're doing. Stay safe. I would think that you and I will stay in touch with each other, and when it becomes apparent that it's time to do another show together, we'll just do that. But until then, I wish we had more time together. Thank you for agreeing to be my friend. We will pray for you. We will bring as much attention to your journey as we possibly can. And until next time, again, God bless you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us.
You bet. This is Laurie Jackson, an independent missionary, coming to us from Western Ukraine, and we'll be touching base with her periodically. See you later. We'll see you after this break.